Hey there! The content you're about to watch is a shortened version of a month-long workshop class I taught in 2021. To access this entire workshop content plus over 20 other workshops equaling over 100 hours of educational content, visit my website annacarolinaarts.com. Not only do you get to watch the lessons, but you get access to the 3D files, exclusive brushes, tools, and resources on art fundamentals, career supports, and more. I hope you enjoyed this video. So I just went in here and I kind of looked around a little bit for the most realistic skull I could find. Let's start by analyzing the skull and breaking it down into its simplest shapes we can, because honestly that's the best way to get started, in my opinion. The best way is to like kind of wrap your mind around it. So I'm gonna open up Photoshop. So what I'm doing is I'm taking screenshots from different angles of the skull I'm going to be using for today. So I found that my students have this particular problem, so I'm going to bring it up, where when gathering reference of something 3D, they just have a natural chance to forget the top and bottom. All right, so this is a nice place to begin. Okay, you don't want to come in here and do like the super careful, beautiful little outline that looks like perfect. No, you want to simplify. Like straight line, straight line. You know what I mean? Really simplify those shapes. It's super important in this scenario. What we're working on, and I'm going over this for anybody who's new and anybody who's needs a refresher. What we're working on is the primary forms of our model. The primary forms are basically the foundation of the entire model. They're what you see from far away. They're what all the other types of forms lay on. So getting all these proportions correct, all these volumes correct now is indispensable. One of the biggest issues that beginners do is beginners will go too fast into details. So the hierarchy of form is used in drawing, 3D modeling, sculpting, and everything else. Marble sculpture, if that's what you were into. And the primary forms are basically the big shapes that are this structure that will host all of the smaller shapes within it. So let's say we were doing a train. The orange right here would be the primary forms. The secondary would be kind of the medium forms that lay on top of the primary. And the tertiary would be more of the details. So let's go over what that would look like in the human body. So this is kind of what the primary forms look like, minus the abs. Really basic shapes that compose the big forms. The proportions, that's when we really perfect the proportions, is during the primary form. So before I even moved on to any sort of detailing, I already knew exactly how long the arms had to be, exactly how long the legs had to be, how wide. Then, eventually, we get through secondary and tertiary forms to actually get to a more detailed model. It really pays off to not getting patient with this. It really pays off to actually go through the process and get your primaries down. So just kind of coming in here and doing a quick paint over, trying to keep it straight. You can also use the shift drag or the shift click tool to kind of create those nice straight lines, and this will help a whole bunch. So we get anxious when we're sculpting. We want to get to the fun part. I want to make all this cool in his nose. Come on, let's do it. But I want to make this drawing specifically so that I can calm myself down and know exactly what to focus on. I'm not going to get carried away with the stuff that's inside the nose if I'm trying to follow along with these lines. So let's pretend I did this for everything, but I also recommend breaking down the parts as well in color scheme like this, so that you can understand which part is which, where they're going. Alright, so I'm gonna start with a sphere, the most classical shape to create a skull with. We've been doing it forever, right? We always start with the little sphere for our little skull. I'm going to go ahead and make it Polymesh 3D so that it's fully editable with all of the correct settings. And you can see right here I got divisions and all these other sort of geometry settings in my tool panel that you wouldn't normally have if you weren't in a Polymesh 3D. Alright, so we're gonna start by creating our cranium, which is the little part that houses our little brain. This part right here, the back parts. We're going to isolate it. We're only going to make it for now, okay? So we're going to create it, and we're going to think about its proportions, and we're going to keep it very clean. Depending on what I'm blocking out, I like to use the snake hook or the move. But since this one is basically already a sphere and it just requires subtle subtle changes, I'm gonna use the move. That's usually how I choose between the two. Snake hook for dramatic or long pulls, move tool for more careful work. The widest part of the skull from the top is towards the back of the heads, behind the ears right here. If you trace a line straight across, you'll find that is right back here. And this is a very common issue where people very often, how do I put it? People very often don't do the longest part right here. They'll do the longest part like at the front. Try to get there and keep it clean, right? We don't want to go super tiny with our brush and start creating lumps. No, we are going to keep our brush big. So we're going to just add in the jaw, and we're going to add in the cheekbones, the little zygomatic, by adding a new sphere. Let's go ahead and insert, brush insert, IMM primitives, and I'm going to choose this like sphere 32, which is kind of a lower resolution one, but it's also not crazy. And I'm going to insert it right here in the cheekbones. You'll notice that when I'm trying to make it thinner, it's actually moving, right? It's super annoying that it does that. We can fix it by going to transform, local symmetry, and that will just simply squish it down without moving it. It's a great trick to know. And that's how you make cheek tic-tacs. You take the snake hook and just start shaping. I'm gonna go ahead and bring it all the way around the eye socket. Find all of its anchor points in the skull, and I'm gonna put those in. I'm not worried much about a lot of things right now. Not forget that you can actually edit the original part of the skull, right? To actually create that bigger cavity that we need. With this process, we'll make sure that everything fits together before we commit too much. Alright, I'm just gonna kind of keep doing our model. So I'm gonna go and look at it from the side view, start actually adding in a little bit of a side view, a little bit of a nose, before I even dynamesh it all together. And make sure to keep it low. That's the rule in this particular phase, right? That's the name of the game. Keep it low resolution. Alright, for the jaw, I'm going to actually append a new subtool. I think it's a lot more neat to just have that in a completely different subtool that I can never dynamesh together, because you'll see that the zygomatic is actually attached to the top part of the skull, right? Of course. But the jaw is completely separate. The jaw has to move. Okay, I'm gonna look at it from the front. Mine is super skinny. It's very glued down, right? Go ahead and widen that. Smooth it out a little bit, make it neat. Again, we're not adding teeth during this phase. For those of you who struggle with making things thinner, you can just take the pinch and go to the areas that are too thick, look at them thickness-wise, and then just use the pinch gently along it. Don't go like this or anything, just kind of like long strokes along the surface that you're trying to thin out. So I've already kind of gone ahead and done it on mine, but I'm going to show it anyway. What I did was I zero meshed the skull, and I used the zero mesh guides. There are lots of ways to do this nowadays, but I love zero mesh guides in order to get really clean results, right? So let me show you something. You'll notice that there are some areas where I just can't help it. There are some disgusting little bumps that I don't need yet, right? It just gets in the way of my perfect base. So I got rid of that by doing the zero mesh. So I suppose we can go through it together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the brush that is the ZBrush guides. It's literally the last brush that I have on my by default. So I went in here with the zero mesh guides, and I focused on areas where I want clean ridges. So I kind of traced the zygomatic arch from the top. Try to make it a little straighter than that, and from the bottom. I'm guiding. I'm telling it to do the geometry that I want it to go follow this line here. I'm gonna do it for the orbit. I don't know why I keep trying to do it in one stroke, knowing full well this is my biggest weakness in ZBrush, and I should just do multiple strokes. Then the nasal aperture. I'm pretty sure that's how you say that, but I'm actually not sure at all. Let me go ahead and turn on solo mode. I'm gonna go along the teeth at the top here. Maybe I can try this up a little bit and kind of follow the tempo. Then I'm gonna do zero measure. I'm actually gonna go down a subdivision because I'm pretty happy with the amount of polygons that I have here. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna say same. Here where it says target poly count, you can actually say same, and it will try to keep the poly count when you're zero meshing the same. It's just gonna rearrange your geometry so that it's neater. Boop. And you'll notice that we still got some bumps, but the difference now is that if I come in here and I gently smooth, it would actually smooth out the bumps. And now if you turn on the polyframe, you actually get some like pretty nice like sculpting geometry. I'll start drawing in those lines and breaking up the very straight form of the cheekbones down here into the maxilla. Breaking it down, taking a little clay buildup and starting to like really refine some volume. But I'm not going to add in any wrinkles. I'm not going to add in any cracks where the bones fuse together. We're not going to add that in. We're not going to add in, do you see these little like variations on the surface of the skull? Right here, we got like an indentation, big one. We're not going to worry about that. We're still thinking kind of like base proportions, but with more detail now. We don't want surface. We want to think about base form, volume, not surface. So I'm just kind of coming in, making sure to smooth. And little by little, adding in those secondary forms. So, the way I like to do it, and a lot of people don't do it this way, is I like to use the insert mesh brushes, but you can also append in here and append a sphere and shape your tooth that way, and then mirror it after. But I'm going to do my favorite way. Alright, so I'm going to use the insert mesh brush. So I'm going to go BI for insert, and then I'm going to find my favorite, which is the primitives one. You can't actually do it while you have the subdivisions. I forget about that sometimes. So, sphere time. Whoop. Okay, that's a little crazy, but it works. So I'm going to flatten out the spheres a little bit. Too bad they came in at an angle. I'm going to kind of stretch them out like this. Start kind of just shaping it a little bit. So it's too high up, right? So I'm going to bring it down. And then I'll break symmetry after all the teeth are in and shaped to some satisfaction. I'm going to separate the teeth from the skull I took them out from by going to the subtool palettes, split unmasked point. So now I can hide the extra skeleton and I'll just have the teeth now. Makes it a little easier. For example, I can divide them. So I'm gonna copy them one more time, and you can automatically select polygroups right when you have the gizmo by pressing Control and just clicking once, and it will automatically mask everything else and leave the one you clicked on unmasked. So I'm gonna copy it over one more time, and these are gonna be the canines, right? But we don't need to like mess with them too much right now to get them looking canine-like. They have similar formations to our front teeth. These are like the cutting teeth. They're kind of single pronged, if that makes sense. Right now I'm just focused on rotation, location, and scale as I am copying these over. So these are going to be a little bigger, but nothing too cray. And it's okay if they go into the skull a little bit. We're going to take an opportunity in a little bit to go in here with like the Damien Standard and a few other brushes to start creating like the space for them to exist, you know. And then we're gonna expose some of the roots and just try to get it more right, if that makes sense. All right. I personally think it's easier to sculpt on a sphere topology than cube. Cube has those little points that are super, they're just gonna stay sharp kind of almost no matter what you do, unless you zero mesh it. So I added in all of my top teeth. Beautiful, right? Perfect. It's gorgeous. Anyway, here's a pro tip. If you use the move brush or the snake hook, you're gonna end up messing up all the teeth at the same time. Okay? If you want to edit one teeth at a time and you don't want to be masking all the time, you can just go to the move topological brush. Brush MT. Move topological only moves one group and one object at a time, even if it's the same poly. And for me, all the teeth are in the same subtool because I don't want to have to deal with a bunch of different subtools. I'm going to have one subtool for the top teeth and one subtool for the bottom. So in fact, I'm going to go ahead and merge my subtools right now. So now I've spent all this time making the top row of teeth, right? And I want to make the bottom. I don't want to go through the entire process again because that's not how I'm feeling like I'm going to spend my Wednesday night. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to duplicate the top teeth, the subtool, right? I have all of them in one subtool here. And then I'm going to go to deformation mirror. Yeah. So what it does is it basically mirrored it top to bottom. So now all of the roots are facing down and all of the top of the teeth are facing up. They're totally in the wrong place and whatnot. So we're going to move them down. Right? And they're totally the wrong angle, but it's okay. This gives us a place to start with our bottom teeth so that we don't have to like manually place each one. So I'm kind of just going to start rotating them into position. They're going to be a little smaller. So yeah, they're not perfect, and there's no way they're gonna fit on the jaw as they are. So just do your best, and then we can start editing one by one. I added some of the little like the little holes that the skulls have, but we're gonna add those in tertiary forms if you haven't added them already. All right, those are kind of like I myself couldn't quite categorize them into secondary or tertiary. So we will be adding those. Let me get a picture of an actual skull, not a scan. This one. If I zoom in, what I'm going to be considering tertiary forms are stuff like this. These ridges along the jaw, ridges along the zygomatic arch. If your skull that you're using has imperfections, like it's been weathered off by time, it's got some damage maybe, then that could be tertiary form. This skull has very, very intense nasal bone, where the nasal bone connects to everything. You see, like there's like even a hole right here. Can you guys see that okay? It's kind of blurry even on my end. There's a huge hole right there. That would be tertiary. All these little holes in the skull would be tertiary. What is not tertiary is surface detail. So for example, when we worked all last month on the bodybuilder, things like big wrinkles like under the armpits were tertiary shapes, but the actual skin texture itself, the pores, the little hairs, whatever, that is surface detail. So things like these tiny little, you see like these tiny little holes all over, basically the bone texture itself, tiny little cracks all over, things like that. Don't worry about those. That is surface detail. All right, so I like to soften those a little bit because, as you know, I like to have control over my work. Sometimes, though, the brush strokes will actually form a pretty nice natural flow to things, and I'll keep them in. Such as right here. I actually like these brush strokes at the edge of the zygomatic right here. I like them. They kind of look like bone to me. So I'm going to leave them. I'm just going to choose based on what serves me the best. So that's the first step for the tertiary shapes. So I'm going to turn on my Damian standard. I'm going to make it nice and high focal shift, so it's spiky. I'm going to make it small. Let's look at a real or a non-cleaned up skull. So an actual photography skull. Let's make it nice and small. Let's test. It's starting to look pretty good. I'm gonna store a morph target just in case I need it. So I already had one from before, but I'm just gonna go ahead and store it. And let's see. I'm going to make a layer. And I'm gonna call it cracks. I'm gonna come up here. And I'm going to just start drawing in those cracks. And then we can like make them nice and messy and organic later. So I can't even tell on the skull where it goes, where it comes from. Come in here, start dragging those on. And just, you don't have to be like following it exactly, just try to do your best. I like to leave mine a little bit understated. I think I went too high. Then I look at it from all sides. So don't be afraid to not be perfect with it. Actually, I think it looks better if you're not perfect with it. Like in some areas, I'm gonna go over it twice and like just let it split off a little bit. Like this, not too much, but just a little bit. Maybe like a weaker line. Looking at it from the front, looking at it from every angle, right? We're not gonna get stuck in one angle. This is one of the worst habits ZBrush users have, which is we just sit there, we zoom in, we get to a position, and we stay forever, right? Until we're done. Let's say I'm gonna come in here and I'm gonna do it until I'm done. Then only later am I gonna zoom out and check the other sides, and I'm like, oh no, what did I do? It looks like doo-doo. So we can't do that. We need to have this nice habit, and I urge you all to have this nice habit. Always zoom out. Look at the big picture. You can't get carried away thinking only little picture, right? Just like with our lives and our jobs and everything else that we do. Getting tunnel vision is not good for the big picture. We need to zoom out first things. Layers, super important for this particular part of the process, and I explained why last week, but during today's demo, it's going to become extremely clear why, right? Layers are going to give us all these options to reduce intensity, increase intensity, invert. I'm going to start by just creating a new layer, and before I go in with alphas for the little cavities or anything like that, I am going to create overall surface deformation, a little bit of grunge, a little bit of imperfection. That is super important, because simply coming in here on this like relatively flat model and applying alphas is not enough. We actually gotta break up that surface just a little bit. So what I'm gonna do is break it up by going to surface, noise. And you'll see, just like when we change colors in the edit polypaint menu, you can see only the preview in here. You cannot see the preview out in the main editor, which I wish you could, honestly. But you'll notice that there has been a default surface noise applied to my model. Can you guys see that? It is looking a little fine. It almost looks like leather or suede. So what I want is to break up the forms a little bit and make it look more organic. So I'm going to change the noise scale, and I'm going to scale it up. It's kind of extreme, I know. I'm going to scale it up a little and move the strength. This will be in a layer, so we also have all sorts of options there. I'm going to make it even a little bit bigger without the formations, ideally. Alright, and right off the bat, I'm already getting kind of a much more organic look to my piece. Of course, this is not the end, right? We don't just apply noise automatically and call it a day. This is just a foundation for the kind of look I want to go for. So I'm going to hit OK. This is very important. Until you hit apply to mesh, this is basically just a preview. It's not going to stick. If you don't say apply to mesh, it's also not going to apply to the layer that you made. Okay, so I'm going to say apply to mesh. It's going to think a little bit. This might take a little while on your ZBrush. Don't click buttons until you are done. So now I have kind of a more textured look already, really easy, right off the bat. And I can mess with it in my layers as usual. So I can tone it down, I can invert it, etc. Tone it down a little. It's the beauty of using layers, right? If I had done this directly without layers, I would literally be stuck here. What can I do? Smooth it, right? No, I can't. That would take, that would be horrible. So this will give us a foundation for the actual manual texturing process that we're going to be doing on the skull. But I think it's a good foundation, and it gets you pretty far with low amounts of general efforts. It just breaks up the surface just enough that you're going to get a naturally more organic look. I really like the way the back of the skull looks and the side. Alright, so the next layer is going to be, what should we do next? I think the little cavities could go next. So I'm going to add a layer, and I'm going to call it little cavities. I like to number my layers. That helps me keep track if there's multiple, because I am notorious. Like, if I make pore layer, I'm going to make 14 pore layers. You know, so keep them numbered so that you can separate them in your mind. So for this one, I'm going to use the standard brush. The standard brush is normally the brush I use to apply my alphas. Not always, but yeah, pretty often. I'm going to change it to drag rectangle, which is going to change the application method, right? You guys all know this. Now you can drag on the alpha like this, as opposed to like having to like paint it on. And I'm going to choose, what's a good one? This one might be too sharp. Oof. Maybe if I turn the focal shift down or up, turn the general intensity down. It's not quite what I want. And of course, you can make your own alphas through multiple processes. In Photoshop, you can make him in inside of ZBrush. You can do a lot with your alphas. Oops. So let's see, it's a good place with some good cavities around the nose area here. I'm gonna keep it low. And don't forget, since this is on a layer, if I go too low, I can always fix it. Alright, so the last step, you know, of course, there's a bunch of refinement you can do, but I do also want to show rendering today, so I'm going to kind of fly ahead. And let's do the tiny little holes. So this one definitely needs its own layer. I'm going to add a layer. I'm going to call it little holes, not to be confused with little cavities. And I'm going to go ahead and store a morph target again, because this is the state I want it to be in. Go ahead, and there are thousands of ways you can do these little holes. One of them is maybe the standard brush with the drag rectangle, and then you could choose one of these round alphas. Let's see. So I'm just adding these little holes in, and it's okay, we're gonna refine. It's okay for now, just plotting in. I'm going to choose the position I want for my render. Decide where he looks the most handsome from. She. This is female skull. Say like this. I'm going to go to Z plugin and ZBrush to Photoshop. So let's go ahead and try it. Let's see what happens. I'm going to go ahead and send to Photoshop. Alright, so that's a really basic render, but it just helps, how do I put it, bring value to your piece as you post it. I used to post on Instagram only screenshots, direct screenshots from ZBrush, literal Windows Shift S screenshots, and I built my entire following that way actually. But nowadays, I'm a little bit more refined with more sophisticated tastes, and I think the 5 minutes that it takes you, even less if you're not talking, to just get a little 3-point lighting inside of Photoshop like this is worth it, right? It's worth it. It's a nice little value add to your piece. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Do you want to get the full lessons with more detail? Visit my site annacarolinaart.com for information. Goodbye!